Is the Electoral College good for American democracy today? The Electoral College was established during the Constitutional Convention as a compromise between those who wanted Congress to appoint the president and those who wanted the people to directly elect the president. One element that was of much contention of having a direct vote was who would be eligible to vote. Virginia was particularly wary of a popular vote because despite being the most populous state, upwards of 60% of their population were slaves. So Virginia, and other southern states with similar slave populations, wanted congressional seats to be allocated by total population, and for Congress to select the president. In the end, the 3/5 compromise and the Electoral College were agreed upon to settle the difference. Electors would be allocated based on congressional seats, and those electors would be selected by each state to vote on their behalf on the president. The modern arguments for keeping the Electoral College is that balances the power between larger and smaller states, so smaller states have a better say in selecting the president. The modern arguments against is that it disenfranchises voters by giving more voting power to voters in some states versus others, and creates a scenario in which only a handful of swing states have any real power in the election. So what do you think? Is the Electoral College good for American democracy today, or should the US move away from it? This question is currently being posed to states across the country, who are weighing joining the National Popular Vote Compact, which would keep the Electoral College but states would allocate their electoral votes based on the National Popular Vote winner. One of the chief arguments in favor of the Electoral College was that it would prevent the election of a demagogue who had captured the popular imagination, but had no business being president. Having obviously failed in its purpose, it should be done away with. The truth is that it was never good for American democracy. It corrected a false problem in order to protect the institution of slavery. The modern issue is that it's basically impossible to change without massive upheaval at this point due to polarization. I think the root of the problem lies at capping the House of Reps at 435 as the total votes in the EC is Reps Senators 3 for DC. Uncapping the House would allow low-pop states to still punch above their weight, but it wouldn't be as disproportionate as it is now. Absolutely not. The Electoral College needs to be completely removed as soon as possible. The EC does nothing but give Republicans an unfair boost. If they want the presidency, they should be required to actually win the votes of the people. No. The Electoral College is unnecessary in the modern world. EC supporters always claim that if it was abolished, candidates would ignore small states, but that already happens under the EC. In 2020, neither Trump nor Biden visited the two least populous states, Wyoming and Vermont. Under the Electoral College, candidates will only visit swing states. There are no valid excuses for the continuation of the current system of the EC. One vote, one person. The smaller states have a much bigger say with the Electoral College. It shouldn't be allowed anymore. Another piece of this, which I didn't mention in my original post, is how the Electoral College created the two-party system. In order for a candidate to win the election, they must reach 270 electoral votes out of the 538 possible votes. If three candidates split the vote relatively evenly, none would have a chance to reach 270 votes. That would result in Congress appointing the president and vice president instead of the people. If there is any hope of breaking free from our two-party system, we need a popular vote, and what would be even better is a popular vote with ranked choice voting. The Electoral College was given as a concession to southern states so that they would ratify the Constitution. The founders never wanted it. Slave owners wanted to be able to vote for their property to have equal or more political power to northern cities. They didn't want the people to be able to vote directly as it would go against their interests. Some things never change. People can hate it as much as they want. I prefer a proportional system instead. Removing the EC doesn't magically erase your problems or pass your idle bill wish you want badly. I don't think any political scientist, or at least very few, would defend it as a good system or recommend it for constitutional design. It's extremely common in constitutions to have things that were either necessary compromises at the time which cause problems or ideas that since become outdated by new knowledge about how to design governments, or by changing norms and how the actual standards developed rather than how they were intended to be. The list of known flaws with the EC is quite long. It's just hard to replace it since doing so inevitably hurts some existing power faction. No. It solves a problem that isn't a problem in the first place. States can't vote. The concept of making sure smaller states have a voice is a nonsensical concept. All the EC does is ensure less popular platforms gets placed into law, when it failed to meet any democratic requirements to do so. If people are worried their political views won't be represented if the EC goes away, then they need to do better to make their platform more popular, not by lowering the bar. It's wholly fucked in its current iterations. It may be more effective if we had regulations preventing gerrymandering, compulsory voting election day holiday, and overturning of Citizens United campaign finance reform. Electoral college is a red herring. Its actual value range is somewhere between minor detriment and minor benefit. Not a political issue worth wasting time thinking about. The actual issue is that the number of seats in the House is capped, which warps the value of the Electoral College. They've said for years that the EC levels the playing field for the less populated states. In the modern context, this means tipping the field in favor of red states. There are more red states than blue states. So conservatives should always have an advantage in the Senate if they play their cards right. Giving those less populated red states an advantage in presidential elections as well, through the EC, is anathema to the principle of democracy. Considering every time the Electoral College disagrees with the popular vote, it elects the worst possible person, I'm gonna say it needs to go. It would seem a better question to ask is, are Americans ready for an upgrade? Like everything in present day, given the technological advancements and the population growth, systems that once worked for what existed in the past do not apply that well today. Therefore, the question should be, what does a democracy system for the times look like and when can it be implemented? The old arguments need to fade away. The only arguments for the Electoral College are all based on willfully nullifying the votes of opposing parties. It's voter suppression wrapped in protecting small-town America from the city folk. The EC is designed to be anti-democratic. Our founders set up a gentleman's oligarchy. Today we have a corporate oligarchy. National elections are little more than ceremonial. The two-party system is what's bad for our democracy. We need to take the power away from the two parties, create term limits and enforce campaign finance reform. We also need to hold our elected officials to the same legal rules that we all have regarding investing and insider trading. Absolutely not. It is a purely anti-democratic institution from a time when the aristocracy held total control. The Senate already balances power between small and large states. The other two branches should be decided with everyone's vote being equal. So, no, the Electoral College ill serves us. Same for the House. Due to gerrymandering, we're ill-served there as well. If the House was expanded to better represent the population now versus the 1700s, it would be a much more fair system and make gerrymandering mostly moot. No, Trump pretty permanently fucked up a lot of things in the US, and the only reason he was allowed to was this bunk-ass system. It's explicitly anti-democracy. The people should elect the president. One person should equal one vote. Full stop. If anyone's vote is worth less than any other person, the system is a failure. It should be one person, one vote for president. States are already equally represented by 2 senators each, regardless of population. Disregarding the popular vote is not fair to people who are not in the swing states. Absolutely not. The EC and the Senate's apportionment by state are both antique, obsolete holdovers completely out of place in a highly urbanized United States where most of the population now lives in just 11 states.